study. Immigrants do not commit more crimes in the U.S. despite fear-mongering. Another article, immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S.-born Americans, studies find. And a third article, study finds that no crime increase in cities that adopted sanctuary policies despite Trump claims. Thank you.
Be very interested in reading those. Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to the Biden-Harris administration, border crisis, illegal aliens flooded sanctuary cities, overwhelmed their infrastructure, and maxed out their budgets. According to the New York City Mayor Eric Adams, by the end of the fiscal year 2025, the city had spent more than $12 billion on illegal aliens for their city. A study also shows that for Denver, one study estimated that city had spent $356 million on illegal aliens. And Ms. Walters, according to the report, the mayor of Chicago spent $638 million in vendor contracts for illegal aliens since 2023. Ms. Walters, have you seen your taxpayers' dollars being used to benefit illegal aliens instead of the American citizens?
Yes, and actually, after he spent all that money, he then came back and tried to propose a $300 million property tax on the American citizens. So not only did he take our tax dollars and spend it on people who, and let me just say this, when you come across that border illegally, you have broke the law, therefore making you a criminal. So the 20 million people who cross this border are criminals. So let's just get that, get that straight right now. That's why we trust President Trump, because he is listening to the American citizens. And the Democrat Party, that's why their rating is, what, 26%? Because they refuse to listen to what the American citizens want.
Ms. Walters, I think really, Ms. Walters, I think really you're right. And I think, so is that how you see Chicago flipping red? Is it the immigration issue? I know that was a big issue in this election, and I agree with you. If people come across the border illegal, they are lawbreakers by definition. And we're not a sanctuary city in Alabama, but I'll tell you this, I had a 14-year-old girl drug into a restroom in Wetumpka, Alabama, and raped by an individual who he had claimed to be a minor when he came to the U.S. He was 31 years old. And the Biden administration didn't bother to do a background check, turn him loose into our community. And we're not a sanctuary city. I cannot imagine what these sanctuary cities are having to deal with. And these law enforcement officers, when they're trying to just, for public safety purposes, catch people and then not even notify us because they just want to release them back into the community. So tell me, so you think this issue of just the very people who supported the Democratic Party are being left in the cold, in my humble opinion. And so is that how you're seeing Chicago flip red, because of the Democratic policies and what they're doing to those communities they're supposed to be protecting? Yes.
Chicago flips red established because of that. And we are going to make it our business, because we have seen the destruction that the Democratic Party policies have done to our communities in our city. It's funny that Mr. Garcia is from Chicago and cannot tell you what's happening in our community, because if he came into our community, he would see all the gang graffiti, the Trendy Agua signs, the MS-13. He would see that across the street in the park and where they are putting the shelters at, that all the needles that's in the park, all night. All we hear is music all night, and the drinking and the defecating on the streets, all the the illegal restaurants that are allowed to operate on the residential, on our corners.
So Ms. Walters, in some ways, you feel almost like a prisoner in your own community because of the policies of the administration prior to Trump.
Yes, and then they can't lock them up. My husband just retired. He's a police officer. They cannot lock them up, and they wasn't reporting the numbers. So if an illegal alien committed a crime, they wasn't reporting it, and then you didn't know.
So that's why they say, oh, there's less crime by a lot of the illegals, because they're not bothering reporting the crimes that illegals are actually committing in those communities.
Yes.
I got you. Hey, real quick question, and you can finish up on this. Democrats really, they attack Republicans often. They call us racist racist because of our opposition to sanctuary jurisdictions. What is your response to that when they say, we're here trying to make communities safe and they're calling us racist? What is your response to that sort of rhetoric?
I say, call me a racist. And I don't want anybody who crossed over here illegally, unvetted, I don't want them in my community. So you call me racist because let me say, the Democratic Party is so far from reality. They go in their gated communities. I don't see any of those people that's advocating to keep these people here. I don't see them in their house and their communities. They don't have them around their children or their husbands, but yet and still they're advocating for us to allow this in our communities around our kids and our families.
Thank you, Ms. Walters. I got to yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Time has expired. Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much. I just want to clarify that usually when we talk about racism in the Republican Party, it has to do with things like deleting the history of Jackie Robinson, deleting the history of Harriet Tubman, or deciding that the Tuskegee Airmen should be deleted, or maybe just defunding the African American Museum. The list kind of goes on and on and on, but I am not here to talk about why they are racist. I am here to talk about some other things as it relates to immigration. So let's get to that. You know, it's interesting because we got all these theories. I don't know why we put up with getting data and facts if we just gonna sit here and talk about how we feel. So, you know, maybe we can inject some facts into these feelings. I'm not really sure. But as somebody who has actually practiced criminal defense, I don't know if there's anybody else in here who has, I can tell you that I have handled thousands of cases, not hundreds of cases, thousands on the state level in Texas, Arkansas, and the federal level. And I can tell you that, you know what? If I had to look at the vast majority of the cases that I was representing criminal defendants on, the vast majority of them just didn't happen to be immigrants. These are just the facts of my experience, and maybe the immigrants went to somebody else. I don't know, but I can tell you in my actual experience, in real life, in reality, and not in this fallacy world that y'all are making up where you hate on everybody. So my Republican colleagues are here using today to continue pushing this false narrative of sanctuary cities harboring criminals, yet right here in D.C. we have a 34-count felon being harbored in the White House. The hypocrisy coming from your side of the aisle over concerns regarding lawlessness is outrageous. Right now, House Republicans are conducting town halls with constituents lying about our legal system. That, quote, there is no due process if you come here illegally because you violated the law. That immigrants, quote, are not entitled to due process. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that. We all want to live in a country where we respect the law. So I'm a bit surprised that Republicans aren't up in arms with Trump detaining and deporting U.S. citizens and people who are lawfully present here in the United States. What Trump and ICE are doing is a disgrace, and it's all being done without respect for our laws. For example, Mr. Neri Alvarado, a Dallas-based baker, was arrested and deported to El Salvador prison for having an autism awareness tattoo in honor of his 15-year-old autistic brother. This was done despite never having been to El Salvador, despite having no gang affiliation, and despite having no organized crime connection. He was deported because ICE agents have been detaining, quote, all Venezuelans with tattoos. And to be clear, this type of racial profiling isn't just a one-off. In fact, the ACLU, using DHS's own data, mind you, found that at least 65% of the states and local agencies voluntarily working with ICE have records of racial profiling and civil rights violations. Mr. Franklin, first of all, and Sheriff, let me thank you for your service too, because I appreciate law enforcement. I just want to put that out there. But Mr. Franklin, Major Franklin, you're a decorated law enforcement officer. Yes or no, in your experience, does racially profiling people make communities safer?
No.
And yes or no, does ICE forcing state or local law enforcement to detain people make communities safer?
No.
You know, it's interesting because we've already, and we're gonna, you know, do Groundhog's Day a couple of times, seemingly here. Actually, let me give you the facts real quick before I go to that. In fact, a report for the American Immigration Council found that cities that didn't enforce ICE detainers have 35.5% lower crime rates, 2.3% lower poverty rates, and rely less on public assistance, including 4.9% less for children under 18. And I do want to be clear, right now, ICE is trying to work with the IRS because we actually take in billions of dollars because of immigrants in this country, and now they're going to try to get them out. And I'm going to tell you that the biggest issue that we have, I really don't think this should be a partisan issue, so I'm going to agree with my Republican colleagues. I think that we all should want to be safe in our communities. The problem that we have is that we have an incompetent administration, that everything that they touch turns to shit. Because what they do is they take a wide sweeping brush and they have decided that the enemy is now going to be immigrants instead of taking a scalpel. That's all we're asking, is to be exact in what you're doing instead of taking a sledgehammer to everything. Thank you, and I will yield.
Mr. Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Democrats keep using the phrase constitutional crisis, but the real constitutional crisis is sanctuary city mayors, DAs, and judges who are defying federal law and preventing the president from doing the job that he was elected to do by the American people. It is the job of the federal government to keep Americans safe. When violent gangs are taking over American cities like Chicago, that is an invading army. When you can't live peacefully in an apartment in Colorado, that is also an invading army. No judge, DA, or liberal mayor should be able to usurp the power of our commander-in-chief, who was elected by 77 million Americans, and now the Supreme Court agrees. Since the Democrats do not like the result of the election, you would think that they will be focusing on the midterms coming up, but instead they are engaging in a judicial coup d'etat. The reason they are not focused on the midterms is because they are not confident that they can take back control of the House of Representatives in 2 years, because they have no leader and they have no valid message. The Democrat Party has a 21% approval rating with voters in this country. And why? Because their only message is Trump is bad. They've gone so far as to attack people for driving electric vehicles. They openly admit that they are DEI hires, and they claim that the reason they're not popular with voters right now is because they are not opposing Trump enough. That's the reaction to their failure. Their solution is to become more extreme and more unpopular with their policies. This question must be asked: does the Democrat Party hate President Trump more than they love our country and more than they love the safety of my fellow Americans? This might explain why they are willing to overtly defend members of Trinidad MS-13 rather than stand up and clap for a child with a terminal brain cancer illness, or for a young man admitted to West Point, my alma mater, or for a family of the gentleman who was murdered in Butler, Pennsylvania. Trump derangement syndrome is real. It's a real thing. And sanctuary policies are harming my fellow Americans, as my witnesses have testified here today. This U.S. congressman is tired of seeing mothers, daughters, and wives of Americans raped, maimed, and murdered by Trinidad and MS-13 and other violent criminals that have snuck across the border to destroy this great nation. All of us should support ICE raids, the hard work of Tom Homan, Customs and Border Protection, and the policies of our duly elected Commander-in-Chief. Ms. Carter-Walters, thank you for being here, ma'am. I really appreciate your testimony earlier. In your experience, specifically in Chicago, are communities of color disproportionately impacted by illegal migrants getting special privileges? And if so, how?
Yes, so they are placed in our communities. They are not placed anywhere else but in our communities. And they are taking over our schools. So whereas you already had overcrowded schooling, so you might have 20 to 1 class. Now you have 40 to 1 class, and then they don't speak English. So now that's taken away from the child already who is already in an overcrowded classroom. And then you have where now we can't even, they took over our parks. So where you'll have grandmoms and things, kids, to keep the kids off the street, they house illegals into the field houses. So they took over our field houses. And then now apartments, whereas because our mayor is paying so much money for illegals to house them, now we have tenants that can't even, the landlords that won't even rent to American citizens because they're renting to illegals because they get paid more for illegals.
Now, let me ask you the next question, ma'am. You've been black for a pretty long time, right?
Yes.
So me too. I mean, I've been black for my entire life. So just want to acknowledge that. So by basically what you're saying, do you view yourself as a different American, or do you just care about the safety of our community? Are you a racist for feeling this way?
No.
Thank you very much. And Sheriff Wagner, thank you so much for your service. I really appreciate all you've done for this great country. You've been a hostage negotiator, detective, a patrol sergeant, and sheriff. Your accolades are unbelievable. My question for you is this: what are the Democrats in your state doing to prevent you from doing your job? And do you expect more of this, or are you not allowed to enforce the law?
It's come down to I'm not allowed to or else. And that's really what we're faced with. We have an attorney general that is going by his marching orders, whatever you want to call it, and coming after our little agency to serve as a message to the rest of the state of Washington. And if you look behind me, that's why these sheriffs are here today. They all feel the heat. They feel the situation is bearing down on us. We're only 39 sheriffs in our state, and our state needs sheriffs, believe it or not. But they keep trying the attack constantly.
Thank you. And as somebody that has worn the uniform, I understand the importance of leadership, and it starts at the top. Thank you so much for what you've done for our great nation.
Has expired.
I have a unanimous consent request.
I yield back the remainder of my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
There was no time remaining. I have a unanimous consent request.
Go ahead.
To enter into the record an article about it's entitled U.S. Citizen.
Inhumane immigration policy that is making our communities less safe. The administration, and as we heard today, the chairman of this committee, speak as if all immigrants are criminals. The administration is draining resources away from other important law enforcement priorities and is even targeting legal immigrants and vulnerable populations. It's no surprise that many states and localities do not want to aid and abet the president's extreme anti-immigrant agenda. Recognizing that good policing depends on building trust with their residents, many cities forbid their law enforcement officers from questioning victims of crime or witnesses to a crime about their immigration status, and they do not share immigration information with federal authorities. They believe that their communities are at greater risk when a victim of domestic violence is afraid to ask the police for protection from her abuser for fear of deportation, or when witnesses to a murder refuse to assist law enforcement in tracking down the perpetrator because they're afraid their immigration status will be discovered. These cities have concluded that if they take on the federal responsibility to enforce immigration laws, it would destroy trust between immigrants and local law enforcement, which would make everyone less safe. Major Franklin, why is building trust with all members of the community so important to policing?
I think you touched on something, sir, regarding the importance of, it's not just for keeping members of the immigrant community safe, because there's a very small number of violent offenders also prey on people outside of that community as well. So as soon as we can get the reporting of the crime, the cooperation from witnesses to have that person arrested, charged, convicted, and get them off the streets and hold them responsible, the better for not just the immigrant community, but the entire community.
Is it fair to say then that if minority communities, immigrants, or really any part of your community feels unsafe going to the police, that it makes everyone in the jurisdiction less safe? And can you explain
Absolutely.
why?
Again, because the importance of that trust, and this isn't something new, by the way. We've experienced the same thing with underserved communities where there's no trust with the police, and we fail to get an accuracy regarding the crimes because they're not reported. There's no trust in reporting the crime because they don't believe the police are going to do the right things, and in many cases, they believe the police may cause them some sort of harm. In the immigrant community, it's about being deported, and not just the victim or the witness being deported, but that victim or witness can be friends or relative of someone else who might be undocumented, and they fear that deportation, so there's going to be limited, if any communication, any cooperation at all with the authorities. And it's not just about communicating with the police. It's about fearing interacting with other positions of authority and services within the city who they believe they may have some sort of relationship with law enforcement. They want to ensure that them and their friends and families are not subjected to deportation.
Thank you. One of the priority Republican bills this Congress, H.R. 32, the so-called No Bailout for Sanctuary Cities Act, which has been teed up for floor consideration in the coming weeks, would gut billions in federal funding for states and localities, including funding for essential programs like public safety, education, and transportation, if states and localities are not able to aid the Trump administration in federal immigration enforcement. Would cutting federal funding from local and state police departments help or hurt public safety?
It would make public safety much worse.
Can you talk about the real-world impact that these cuts would have on the ability of law enforcement to protect their communities?
Absolutely. When I was in charge of Baltimore City Human Resources, we had a special unit that applied for federal grants because we need the funding, we need the resources, not just for law enforcement activities and duties, but for other important things like youth programs, which are extremely important, other services, mental health services. There are many types of critical services that our communities need.
Okay, thank you. As we've heard today, my Republican colleagues talk as if all immigrants are criminals. Could you tell us whether that's true and whether, in fact, the studies show that the crime rate among immigrants is lower than the crime rate among native-born American citizens?
Studies show that among the immigrant community, it's lower.
So most immigrants are not criminals?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I yield back.
Time has expired. Sheriff Nails.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the panel for being here. Thank you, Sheriff Wagner, those distinguished gentlemen behind you. I want to thank you all for your service. I'll give you a round of applause. Thank you for our county sheriffs. We need them. We need them. They're supported. You know, most of the crime, and I know Mr. Franklin or Major Franklin, you were talking about the distrust between the police and the communities they serve. Let's be honest with each other. You know where the distrust begins, right? It all starts in these large cities across America. I bet you if you ask one of those sheriffs, we had everyone come up here, they don't have a problem with trust between their agents or their deputies and the people they serve. It takes place in these large cities, the San Franciscos, the Chicagos. When you look at Chicago, and Ms. Walters talking about Chicago, you had Lori Lightweight there. I mean, her approval rating was in the toilet. What, a 22% approval rating? I think she was the first incumbent to lose re-elect. And why is it? Her policies. It was the sanctuary city policies. She was horrible, absolutely horrible. All the anti-police rhetoric. Would you agree with me that that's why Lori Lightweight is no longer the mayor in Chicago?
Yes, and that's why Brandon Johnson has a 6% approval rating.
You should consider running for mayor. I think you're great. Anyway, Sheriff Wagner, you know, I was the sheriff, Fort Bend County, large county. Everybody that got arrested into my jail, I had about 1,800 beds. When you got arrested, every morning, every name, mine, any name, didn't matter who it was, would get sent to ICE. We'd send it to ICE in Houston. They would scrub that list, and they would then determine who a detainer gets placed on. I complied with every single detainer. Didn't matter if they said a detainer needs to be placed on this guy, and we kept our people safe. That's why I was a very popular sheriff and never had to worry about a re-election, because the people supported what we did. But then when you got some of these liberal states, your state for a good example, Illinois and others, we created a law now in the state of Texas. We had a crazy rogue sheriff in Austin, go figure, in Austin, Travis County, that wasn't complying with these detainers. So we now have a law in Texas that says if you don't comply, a county sheriff does not comply with ICE detainers, you'll be charged with a crime and then you'll be removed from office. And most sheriffs across the great state of Texas support that. I believe you would as well.
Yeah, I would.
Because it just keeps our people, safe. I want to thank you again, too, in 2005. You know, I read your bio. You were awarded a Medal of Valor for one of your deputies that was shot by an illegal multiple times, I believe.
That is correct.
Yeah. So thank you for your service. You guys are fantastic. You know, you're being sued by your attorney general. I guess you're putting your community at risk. Did you know that?
If I can answer some of that, I know there's a lot going on, but the reality is this. You talked about the size of your agency and your jail. I have a 28-bed facility that's been closed for 3 years. We are not detaining on immigration status. We do share information through the Stone Garden thing that we are a part of, and several other counties across our state are doing, and the state actually gives us the money through it. They're the ones that take their cut and then give us the money. But yes, it is exactly what you're saying.
Some of the actions in a few of the sanctuary jurisdictions, I want you to ask you if you think they're conducive to public safety. In King County, Seattle, illegal alien named Julio Cruz Velasquez, custody in 2019 with priors for rape, domestic violence, burglary, robbery, DUI, drug possession dating back to 2010. King County ignored the ICE detainers, released him into the community. He was then arrested later on for murder. It would have never happened if you'd have just complied with ICE. Does that sound conducive to public safety? No. It doesn't, of course not. The stories go on. Washington County, also in your state, illegal alien Alejandro Melandio Hernandez was arrested for manslaughter and a second degree for killing somebody while driving recklessly. The county ignored an ICE detainer, released him into the community, and he is still at large today. Does that sound conducive to public safety, Sheriff?
No.
Of course it doesn't. Let's go to Boston. April this year, Boston released an illegal alien charged with aggravated child rape rather than comply with an ICE detainer. Does that sound like conducive to public safety?
No.
Of course it doesn't, and the story goes on and on and on. Mr. Franco, we go to Baltimore. April 24, Raul Calderon, a 25-year-old Guatemalan national convicted of fourth-degree sex offense and second-degree assault. Despite ICE detainer's request, Baltimore County released him after suspending his prison sentence. Then in 2024, another individual, 25 years old, convicted of molesting 2 family members, 9 and 10 years old. It just goes on and on and on. Now, Baltimore has problems. You got a lot of corruption in Baltimore. Again, when you look at these major cities, Baltimore, Chicago, everywhere, they're run by far-left liberal Democrats and by Soros-funded DAs. And that's why you're getting clobbered in elections. The American people are sick and tired of it, and they're fighting back. Ms. Walters, I salute you. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Jayapal, and thank you to the witnesses for your testimony today. This hearing is extremely timely. The Trump administration's recent actions against our refugee community are making people less safe, not more safe. Recently, the administration sent emails to Ukrainians escaping Putin's war of aggression, telling them, do not attempt to remain in the United States. The federal government will find you. Then a day later, they said, sorry, we made a mistake. Cutting off resettlement funds for Afghans who made it to the United States after fighting side by side with American troops. That's in this administration's agenda. Turning their backs on courageous Afghans who worked directly with our forces and are desperate to reach our shores, but have to hide out from the Taliban because we're not accepting refugees anymore. Revoking all U.S. visas held by South Sudanese passport holders because their government refused to accept a deportee that the Sudanese government said was Congolese, not South Sudanese. And then this administration claims to care deeply about persecuted Christians while slashing Christian refugee entry by 78% in the first term and doing even less to help Christians who are persecuted enter the United States today. All of these heartless and short-sighted actions by the Trump administration serve no discernible purpose besides bullying those who escaped war, authoritarianism, and disaster. Again, this bullying undermines the stature of the United States in the eyes of the world and makes all of us less safe. It diverts our law enforcement resources away from real threats in order to upend the lives of honest, hardworking people in need of refuge from the United States. Now, with that said, I want to turn to the issue of how intentionally eroding trust of immigrant communities by local law enforcement can impact public safety. Major Franklin, just a couple questions for you. Can you speak to how efforts by this administration to destroy relationships between the immigrant community and local police officers would be detrimental to public safety?
Sure. It would be detrimental in a number of ways. Number one, I spoke earlier to being successful in identifying victims of crime, having crime reported, being successful during the investigation of those crimes so that we can hold those violent offenders accountable. But also it would be detrimental in the loss of critical resources that we desperately need among our law enforcement agencies around the country. And again, I want to speak to the uniqueness of every jurisdiction. We should have the ability to develop our own strategies that would work within those particular communities that have their own special needs. A loss of critical resources would devastate us in the law enforcement community in a number of ways. So I took an oath, not just to the Constitution, but to the people that I serve, to protect everyone who's in my community, no matter what their status is. And in order for me to do that, and my comrades to do that, you've got to have trust. You've got to build trust if you're going to get the information you need so that people aren't fearful in coming forward to report. They don't want to be victimized. They don't want their friends and family victimized. They want people held accountable, and they want to be able to come forward and trust us and not fear them or their friends being deported from the United States.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the U visa, a visa for victims of crimes who cooperate with law enforcement or governmental officials in the investigation or prosecution of criminal activities? And if so, do you think that they're helpful?
Yes, I am familiar with it, and they are helpful. Of course, the police officer has to take the initiative in filling out the paperwork when we're dealing with the victim to make sure that they're able to stay in the community and in the country.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Mr. Van Drew.
Thank you, Chairman. Let's cut through all the noise, all the